You're not spending more than you used to. You're buying less. Same grocery run, smaller cart, same paycheck, less left over at the end of the month. Same life, but it costs more to maintain it now than it did 2 years ago. And the strange part is you can't really point to one thing. It's not one big expense that broke the budget. It's everything, slightly. The grocery bill that's a little higher than you remember. The utility payment that keeps creeping up. The meal out that used to feel like a normal Tuesday and now feels like a conscious decision. All of it, just a little heavier than it was. And you've probably told yourself it's temporary, that things will settle, that prices will eventually come back down the way they went up. But they haven't. And they're not going to. Inflation slowed down. That was real. The headlines confirmed it. The numbers backed it up. The Federal Reserve said the job was mostly done. But here's what nobody explained. Slowing down was never the same thing as coming back down. Those are two completely different things. When inflation slows, it means prices are rising more slowly. It does not mean prices are falling. It does not mean the grocery bill goes back to what it was in 2021. It means the rate of increase decreased. The prices themselves stayed exactly where they landed. They settled. They found a new level. And that new level became the baseline. Not temporarily, permanently. That's not a rough patch you're waiting out. That's the new cost of the life you already had. And most people haven't fully processed what that means yet, because the shift didn't arrive as one dramatic moment. It arrived slowly, quietly, across every category of daily spending at the same time. And it's starting to show up in ways that are hard to ignore. Start with groceries, because that's where most people feel it first. 2 years ago, you had a rough number in your head before you got to the register. You knew approximately what the week's food was going to cost. Now that number is wrong almost every time. Not because you changed what you buy, because what you buy costs more than it did. The staples, eggs, meat, bread, cooking oil, dairy. The items that show up in every cart every week without fail. All of them repriced during the inflation period. None of them repriced back down when inflation slowed. The egg aisle looks exactly the same as it did 2 years ago. The price tag does not. Then there's rent. This one hit differently, depending on where you live, but the pattern is consistent. Rents surged during the inflation period as demand stayed high and costs for landlords increased. Landlords adjusted their pricing to match the new market. When inflation slowed, the market didn't follow. The leases didn't get cheaper. The listings didn't come back down. Anyone who signed a new lease or renewed an existing one in the last 2 years is paying a number that reflects the new baseline. Not what rent cost before, what rent costs now. Then, eating out. Restaurants absorbed higher food costs, higher labor costs, higher energy costs, and higher operating costs, all at the same time during inflation. The only way to survive that was to raise menu prices. So they did. And when inflation slowed and some of those input costs eased slightly, the menu didn't get reprinted with lower numbers. The prices stayed where they were. In some cases, the portion sizes quietly got smaller while the price stayed the same. The meal costs what it costs now. And then there are the quieter increases, the ones that don't come with a headline. Insurance premiums that adjusted upward. Streaming subscriptions that added a few dollars to the monthly charge. Utility bills that settled at a higher rate than they were 2 years ago. Internet and phone plans that renewed at a slightly different number. None of these feel dramatic on their own, but they're all pulling from the same paycheck, and they're all sitting higher than they were. The thing that makes this period feel different from a normal stretch of tight spending is that it isn't isolated. It's not one category that got expensive. It's every category that got expensive at the same time and then stayed there. That combination is what's creating the pressure people are feeling right now. And the reason those prices are still elevated has a specific explanation. To understand why prices didn't reverse, you have to understand how a business actually sets a price. When costs go up, a business has two options: absorb the loss or raise the price. For small and medium-sized businesses, absorbing the loss isn't really an option. Margins are already thin, so the price goes up. During the inflation period, everything feeding into the cost of running a business increased at once: ingredients, packaging, shipping, labor, energy, commercial rent. All of it moved higher, so prices on shelves and menus moved higher to match. That part most people followed. What most people expected was that when inflation slowed, those prices would follow back down. That's a reasonable assumption. It's just not how it works. When inflation slowed, some input costs eased slightly. Shipping costs came down from their peak. Some commodity prices pulled back, but the structural costs didn't reverse. Labor didn't get cheaper. Commercial rents didn't decrease. Energy didn't fully reset. Insurance for businesses didn't come back down. So the business was left in a position where its costs were still elevated, just not rising as fast. And the choice became: lower the price and compress margins back to where they were, or hold the price and protect the margin that the business had adjusted to. Most held the price, not as a coordinated decision, not out of collective greed, just out of individual business math. And here's the part that makes it structural rather than temporary. Once a price settles at a new level, consumers adjust to it. The new number becomes familiar. The old price becomes a memory. And there's no market pressure on the business to go back to the old number because everyone around them is priced the same way. When an entire market reprices at the same time, there's no competitive pressure to come back down. The new level just becomes normal, and normal is where prices tend to stay. That dynamic playing out across groceries, rent, restaurants, utilities, and everyday services simultaneously is what created the environment people are living in right now. A life that costs measurably more to maintain than it did 2 years ago, with no signal that it's going back. This is where the shift stops being economic and starts being personal. Because what a permanent price reset actually means for a household isn't an abstract concept. It shows up in specific moments. It's the grocery run where something goes back on the shelf, not because you can't technically afford it, but because the total is already higher than you wanted it to be. It's the restaurant you used to visit without thinking about it that now requires a small internal conversation before you book. It's opening the banking app at the end of the month and noticing the number is lower than it should be. Not dramatically lower, just consistently, quietly lower than it used to be at the same point in the month. It's the savings rate that isn't where you planned it to be. The purchase you've been pushing back for 6 months. The feeling that you're working the same amount, maybe more, and somehow not getting further ahead. That feeling is not irrational. It's not anxiety distorting reality. It's an accurate read of what's happening. The baseline shifted. The cost of maintaining the same life increased across every category. And for most households, income didn't move at the same pace. Wages did grow during this period for some workers. But for a large portion of households, the wage growth didn't fully close the gap that the price increases created. The math still didn't add up. And so the adjustment happened quietly in behavior. Fewer meals out, smaller grocery hauls, delayed purchases, subscriptions canceled. Habits changed without a formal decision to change them. Just a gradual compression across the month that adds up to a noticeably different daily life than the one that existed before. The part that makes it harder to process is that nothing looks catastrophically wrong from the outside. Employment is relatively stable. The economy hasn't collapsed. Inflation has technically slowed. But inside the household budget, the pressure is consistent, and it isn't easing, because the prices aren't coming back down, which means the compression isn't temporary. It's the new shape of the month. This is why things don't feel like they're improving. Not because something dramatic happened, not because the economy fell apart, but because a quiet, permanent shift occurred and nobody really announced it. Prices went up fast, then they slowed down, and then they stayed. And the life that existed before that shift now costs more to maintain. Not slightly more in one area, more across every area simultaneously. That's what a baseline reset actually means when you're living inside it. The headlines say inflation is cooling. The numbers say things are stabilizing. And both of those things can be true while the household budget still feels tighter than it did 2 years ago. Because stabilizing at a higher level is not the same as returning to where things were. It never was. The gap between what the economic indicators say and what the monthly budget reflects is real. It's not a misunderstanding. It's not pessimism. It's the direct result of a system that repriced and didn't reverse. And once you understand that, the confusion starts to make sense. You weren't imagining it. You weren't managing money poorly. The cost of the life you already had simply went up, and it stayed there. That's what this is.